Yes, we are live now. Welcome back to the second and final session of EAD Vadodara. We have with us Mr. Vikram Gupta. Let me introduce Sir. Mr. Vikram Gupta received his Bachelor of Technology of Engineering from IIT Delhi in 1993. A highly accomplished person in the Indian venture capital industry, Mr. Gupta is the founder and managing partner of IVCAP Ventures, a 200 million USD venture capital fund that invests through the alumni ecosystems. He has around 25 years of experiences in private equity, business consulting, M&A, strategy and operations in healthcare and life sciences, education, consumer goods, and other industries. He has held leadership positions across various well-known companies in India and abroad. Mr. Gupta worked in the US with IBM Business Consulting Services for many years in strategy and planning. Mr. Gupta is very active in Indian startup and venture capital ecosystem. He is the co-chairman of PEVCAI and is an active member of IVCA and CII. Sir has also composed, sang, and video recorded a beautiful fund endowment song for IT Delhi, which is a constant source of inspiration and motivation for me personally. Sir, we are pleased to have you with us. Now,
Thank you so much, Vishal. Vishal. Thank you so much. Really pleasure to be here.
yes, sir. So you all of you must have heard about the theory, survival of the fittest. You must also have heard a statement, a smooth sea never makes a good sailors. Both the survival of the fittest theory and the statement about fit really well with the world of startups. And the world of startups is a violent one. There are 150 million startups in the world today, with 50 million new startups launching every year. On an average, there are 1,37,000 startups emerging every day. These are huge numbers by any standards. But the question remains, how many startups tend to survive the violent waves of change that have completely transformed the very nature of today's startups? Challenges are everywhere. And today, Sir will be discussing the topic difficulties faced in the initial stage of startups and ways to tackle them. Now, without further ado, let me hand over the stage to Sir, and feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A section. They will be taken up at the end. Over to you, Sir.
Thank you so much. And I think ideally, if we can keep this interactive, I will be happy to take questions. And I think some of these numbers that you just quoted in terms of the number of startups, and I think there is a difference between getting ideas versus actually working on those ideas and converting those ideas into a startup and then taking that startup off the ground to actually then getting it funded and then really scaling it up. There's a huge difference, and I think some of the data points which are important to mention here, while the number you quoted sounds interesting and right from the perspective of how many ideas are getting generated every day. But I think if you look at the number of startups which are registered with the government, and the number might be changing very regularly, but I think these registered startups doesn't mean that those are the number of startups out there, because there will be quite a few startups which are not yet registered, and I think probably a 3 to 4x of this number would probably be the actual number of startups out there. So about 60,000 startups which are actually registered with DPIIT. Of course, the when you're registered with DPIIT, there are quite a few um, requirements that you're supposed to meet, and therefore maybe a 4 to 5x of that would be the actual number of startups that may have actually started executing on something. um, but I think it's not just a number. The most important thing is that, are you really doing it because you are genuinely trying to solve a problem? Are you out there to really um, with a focus to do something meaningful and do something different? Because typically when you face a problem, you try to find a solution to it, and then you might think that the solution that you're working on is probably the best solution, and unless you do your research, you may realize later that there are quite a few people who are trying to solve the same problem. So that's when, when you actually go to the market to do an assessment or self-assessment, you realize that there are quite a few people in the market who would have launched their own startups in the similar areas trying to solve the problem in their own ways. And many times people get discouraged thinking that um, there are already startups in that area, so therefore why should we do it? Well, that's a valid question to ask. But at the same time, if you have more passion, a better business model, a better team, and a potential to raise more funds than your competitor, then of course the chances are that you might be more successful than the others. So I think never just discourage an idea just because you believe that, yeah, at the face of it, it appears as if somebody else is already doing it. The other thing is that never set up a company just from the perspective of how much money you can raise for it, because many times so happens that you actually look at the market and you realize that uh, lots of these companies are these days raising huge amount of capital, and you get tempted primarily because the capital raise brings you to the news and attention. People start talking about you. Media gives a lot of attention to startups who are actually raising funds. But then you may not have heard of startups which are actually not necessarily raising funds because they may not need to raise funds because they're profitable from day one. So um, that doesn't mean that that's not a good startup, right? So if you have a profitable model from day one and you don't need to raise funds, it's all right. You may not be as known as maybe your batchmate who actually created a startup which required huge amount of money and was able to convince someone, which actually pretty much becomes a valuation game. Every time you raise a round, there's a valuation and people start benchmarking their shares into the share price that keeps increasing in every round, and that's also very exciting to see. But I guess that's a good validation of your business model, and it also brings a lot more intellectual capital along with the actual capital. So therefore it's a good idea to raise money from smart people because they will help you solve the problem better, provide more support. But at the same time, maybe you need to think about what is the right time to raise capital, because if you raise capital too early, um, you know there could be people who may try to bring in their own influence on the business model itself, and you may actually completely lose your direction that you originally started with. So make sure that when you're doing your startup, always have your direction right, always do things that you're passionate about. Don't end up in a situation where you landed just because you raised funds from the wrong people, and therefore now you're in a situation where it's a completely different problem that you're solving that you were not passionate about. And that's what leads to startup failure as well, that you end up in a situation which you didn't want to be, and just because you raised funds. And that's why you also see, even in startups that have raised capital, the teams may start breaking there. So of course it's extremely important that when you think of an idea, you think of taking it off the ground, the first and foremost thing you do is a lot of research, maybe do some customer surveys, understand from the customers what they're looking for, how they're solving that problem, um, and make sure that there is enough understanding of the market in terms of who else is serving those customers, the price points, how you deliver those products, how does the supply chain look like, and the most important thing is what kind of team you would need to take that idea off the ground. And then comes the basic question about what should be the incentive structure. Who in the team should get how much stake. And that's always a question about, if two people start together, then they typically negotiate a 50-50% stake. But when one person takes a higher risk as compared to the other person, and the other person comes a little later, and I've seen situations where one person started the company from scratch, and then the second person joins in 6 months. The first person took most of the risk, and now has reached some point, and the second person is willing to come on board, provided he also gets 50% stake in the company. Now, it's obviously naturally not fair for that person to ask for it, but then the question is, if you don't give him that stake, the person may not come on board. So there are various structures that are available. One has to involve certain mentors, certain advisors to help basically put a formal or proper structure to this. Otherwise, if you end up giving more stake to a person who hasn't taken enough risk, the chances are that eventually it will start showing somewhere, and may lead to some issues at a later stage. So, incentive model, very important. Don't give too much stake to an angel investor. I have seen startups that give more than end up giving more than 50% stake to angels, and then fail to convince any more investor going forward to help them. And sometimes many founders will end up diluting very small stakes for a larger amount, which would mean that they have valued their startup very high. So, for example, if somebody is raising just 10 lakh rupees, or sorry, if somebody is just giving 1% stake for maybe, let's say, raising 1 crore amount. So effectively, you have already valued your startup at 100 crores. Now, your startup may have just got off the ground, and the investor who gave you 1 crore for 1% may not even have asked you the question how much stake they're getting. But just because you thought, we will get valued at 100 crores and let's get this 1 crore at 1%, um, you end up in a situation where now when you go to the next investor, the investor says your valuation is only 25, 30 crores. Obviously your existing investor may have a problem. So that's why the successful models in the US are more around safe notes, where the valuations early on are linked to the future rounds of valuations rather than defining a valuation upfront. So, so there are lots of those tricks one needs to understand in terms of how to create incentive models from and how to accept money early on. And of course, building a team is extremely important. So you have to obviously make sure that the incentives that you're giving early on are also structured in a proper way. And if you're thinking that the business model will need tweaking around going forward, there's no harm in tweaking around the business model as you go. And if you deployed some capital in a certain area, and if you believe that you've already invested a lot of capital and you want to continue to test that, because otherwise if you change your direction you would have lost a lot of capital in that area. So there's something called fail early, fail fast. It's okay to um, you know take that hard call at some point, and take the decision that you may not necessarily need to put good capital after bad. So these are some of the hard points that the entrepreneurs have to take. And yeah, so I think very happy to answer any questions that people may have. But I think generally, if I were to summarize, make sure that you got a good team in the beginning. That team which is passionate about what you're doing, which you've known for a while. It should not be someone just you met in a cafe and person says let's be co-founders. Just in one or two interactions you start doing a business together. You may not even know each other's temperaments. So work with people you know very well. Find the right investors fit for yourself. Get the right investor on board who can also mentor you, advise you. But before that, get some mentors with you. And given that you guys are IIT Kharagpur, and IVCAP works on the model of the alumni ecosystem, where we bring a lot of alumni as mentors to startups. So very happy to help any of you guys connect with alumni mentors through our platform called IV Camp, where we have lots of registered startups who keep coming to us for advice. Even if you're not ready for funding, we'll tell you that we're not pushing you to raise funds. We will actually tell you what is the right thing to do. So, which is more important for you to get the right advice and raise funds only as much as you need, and not just because somebody is giving you the money, you should accept it. So these are some of the important initial lessons, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that people have so that we can make it more interactive.
Yes, it was very informative, and like we can take up some questions from the audience. And Amitava Roy is asking that how has pandemic affected VC funding?
So pandemic actually, fortunately, unfortunately, I think it has completely changed the entire way of doing things. Right, I'm actually sitting here in Dubai right now, and just to reach here in Dubai, I had to take three, RT-PCR tests before boarding my flight, and after landing, I had to take another test. Travel has become extremely difficult, um, and at the same time, it has given birth to a lot of new creative online ideas and businesses, video based platforms. Consumer sector has changed quite substantially. People are more and more people are buying online, so if you have a business which is leveraging the online platform, any technology that actually solves those problems, anything that helps people consume better at a lower cost and with more convenience, products that they really need, rather than just putting them on the shelf and assuming that they'll buy. I think there's still a lot of inventory driven models which are there. I think if you can create more tech driven solutions, you can create unicorns. And I think the way I see it, India has about what 65, 66 unicorns, and then I think maybe more than that now, almost 70 unicorns. Um, we are potentially going to create another 100 unicorns in the next 3 years, and if that is the case, then there are lots of new ideas which are emerging, which are disrupting the business in the markets. So I think all you need to do is study this online market, study this rural market, for example, study things around which are daily needs, whether it is food or clothing or shelter or healthcare, education, financial services, um, and even solving the tech problems through deep tech solutions and blockchain, AI, machine learning. These are all areas where you see tons of opportunities in India today. So I think you can. Pandemic has only created more opportunities in these areas, and even a product like jewelry, for that matter. Earlier you could only buy on offline. You would never imagine that you will order, a necklace which is valued at 5 lakh rupees. You go online and place an order. It has become a norm these days. People go online and buy these products. So therefore there is a lot of opportunity thrown by this entire change which has happened, and this is a paradigm shift which has happened over the last 1.5 years.
Yes, sir. I hope your doubt was cleared. Yes. Abhishek Kabi is asking that many a times when we raise capital, we as a startup want to lead to different direction, but VCs want us to go in a different direction. So, what should be the key metrics to find the right investor?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying earlier, right? So you need to make sure that you're not going with an investor who doesn't understand your business, right? So obviously, ideally, it is best to go with people who understand what they're doing, but there's a also a downside to that, because if investor you're reaching out to, they already know or they've already invested in the businesses that you are in, the chances are they might tell you that, look, we've already invested in this space, so we can't take another bet in a competing business. So there are pluses and minuses of doing that, but find people who can provide a lot more mentorship. I mean, IVCAP has a mentoring platform, and we, even if you're not able to invest in you, we would want to connect you with the right people so that you get, if nothing else, you get the right advice. So right mentors, right advice is even more important than capital. So if somebody, so there's a very simple example, right? I mean, if you have decided to, let's say, invest 40% of your fundraise into, let's say, marketing and branding, right? And somebody comes and gives you a very unique idea about how to really do guerrilla marketing without investing too much money and still achieve the same outcome. You would suddenly realize that if you're raising a $5 million, that $2 million is not even required, right? So suddenly your fundraise has come down to 3 million, right? So it's a matter of, if you pick up the right people, if they're coming with advice and telling you things where you don't need to spend money, if your fundraise requirement is coming down, then effectively you'll end up diluting less going forward and be more capital efficient. So people who are capital efficient, they are able to grow faster and raise more capital, and therefore are able to become unicorns faster. So that's the way one should approach this.
I hope your doubt was cleared. Uh, Hassan Khan is asking that can someone who is not from an Ivy League or also approach IVCAP, or is it reserved specifically for IITs, IIM students? Like how can tier 2, tier 3 colleges students approach this? He's asking.
No, just because we are called Ivy Cap doesn't mean that we only go after Ivy League students or alumni. We are called Ivy Cap because we have support from the Ivy League alumni to help entrepreneurs across different domains or different backgrounds. It really doesn't matter what's your background. I think what matters is you have the entrepreneurial zeal and passion, and you're there to make a difference. I mean, out of our portfolio, only 60% are IIT alumni. Rest 40% are not. So you can have any background as long as you have a business that can be defended, and you can make a good pitch around it. Uh, any investor would love to invest in you. Of course, it does make a difference when you come from educational institutions who have a very powerful network that makes your access easier, right? So you see IIT alumni are all over the place. They are working as part of the funds. They are two-thirds of the unicorns now, I believe, are founded by the IIT alumni. Even globally, the network is very powerful. So if you're from IIT ecosystem, chances are that your network will be very strong. So that's the reason people give value for that, and that's the reason there's a higher chance that you get picked up for funding. But that doesn't mean that if you come from a different background, you will not get funding. So we have funded startups with all kinds of backgrounds.
Yes, sir, that was helpful. Aditya Patkar is asking that how can Indian colleges improve themselves to foster the spirit of entrepreneurship amongst their students, like particularly tier 2 and tier 3 colleges?
So one is you have to build similar platforms, and maybe you can leverage even Ivy Camp platform to bring your institute on the platform and um, really fund startups getting generated in the campuses. I think the alumni connect works very well, even if the institute is not um very active right now. But if there are alumni who are out there, making a difference, and many times they would want to go back to their institute and help startups coming from those institutions. So one is the alumni connect, which will help you a lot. The second is, of course, your faculty and all that. Also may be very very networked. When you go and talk to your faculty, you realize that they're extremely networked in the ecosystem, and they can help you connect with the right people. And of course, then you need to convince maybe your management of the institution, and maybe a few people can get together to try and convince your management of the institution that let's create an incubation center here, let's get some funding into that, let's activate some people to come and put money into that. And I think there are possibilities where things can be done.
Yes, sir. One of the question is like, what if any startup idea fails continuously during its initial phase? Then what can be the mindset that one should keep in mind?
I don't know how you define failure. I mean, failure is a very strong word, right? So I usually don't use the word failure. I use the word not successful yet. And it could be, you may be trying different methods to achieve your outcome, and if your methods have not worked, you have to keep asking the question whether you are doing the right things. Before executing your model, you have to make sure you have all the data points. You have asked the right questions. uh, Many times people just come up with some ideas and start executing on it without asking questions, and the mistakes they make are very expensive, and by the time they realize they have made a mistake, they've already burnt a lot of capital. They realize that, oh, they had, let's say, 100 rupees. They've already burned 40 rupees to test the first idea, and now they don't know, they've only left with 60 rupees. Now, obviously, before burning that 40 rupees, if you had actually done a lot of research analysis, asked questions, probably you would have completely avoided burning that 40 rupees, right? So not only you would have had more capital later, you would also got learnings from other people's mistakes and other people's learning. So always spend time on research analysis and a lot of thinking and debating before actually putting your time and money into something. So that will help you be more focused, more execution oriented, more outcome oriented.
Yes, sir. That was helpful. There's this one question that what were the difficulties that you personally faced during your entrepreneurial journey, and how did you tackle those difficulties?
First challenge I had was, I many people think that you need a lot of capital to start. When I started my fund, starting a venture capital fund with zero bank balance is what I have done. 2011 March, when I started IVCAP, I had no savings. Um and It was very hard call with a family which was dependent, with lots of expenses, living in an expensive city in Mumbai. So it was not easy call. Um, but I had conviction in my idea. So I think conviction in yourself, belief in yourself is very important. Second thing is, when you're starting something, if you don't have the support, the basic support from your family, the people who are the closest to you, you need to make sure that they understand. I mean, they may not necessarily understand what you're doing, but they understand that you're passionate about something and you're out there to make a difference. So you want them to be aligned with you. And many times it might so happen that there's one person in the family who has a lot of influence in your thinking, but is extremely negative about this, right? So you have to take that call whether you want to onboard that person or you want to tell that person later on or convince that person later on. I had a situation where my brother, who's completely conservative, and he has been my mentor right from my childhood days. And when it came to starting my own business, I knew that if I went and asked him the question, how should I go about it, and I knew that he's also from IIT, and has done exceptionally well in his career. Now heading a large financial services company, writing checks of single checks of 100 200 million dollars in private equity. The point is that, I mean, I had a lot of respect for him, but his mindset works more on the debt side, though. So it's like structured transactions that he does. You know, so I knew that if I had to discuss that idea with him, he would have said no, don't do it. And I just didn't tell him that I was doing it. For the first 5 6 months, I kept doing it, and after I kind of achieved a certain point, I kind of started talking to him. I think it's a call one needs to take. If you strongly believe in yourself, pick your bets properly. And then after I started, of course, there was an issue of um, how will I survive myself, right? So I actually took a loan from the bank to get started. And seeing my conviction, when I started talking to lots of people, people started realizing how strongly I believed in what I was doing, and therefore people started supporting me. Stay focused, believe in yourself. uh, Things will come your way. Your things will happen. So as long as you are convinced about what you're doing, as long as you are focused, as long as you know you have planned properly. I spent almost 3 4 months just planning that the worst case scenarios, what if scenarios. If this happens, how will I tackle with that situation? If that happens, how will I tackle with that situation? But once I had done all that planning, I just jumped into it straight away. I didn't continue to do the analysis paralysis kind of a thing that, you have to jump at some point and take risk. And there are people who will continue to work with corporates and keep thinking, and then finally somebody else does the same idea and you lose the boat. So go for it and just do it. And then, of course, once you start, then things start, helping you in various ways. I mean, there are various other challenges during the first year, second year, third year. First year are different challenges, second year different challenges. First year is all about convincing people that the idea you're thinking is the right idea, you are the right person for it, you have the ability to build team, you have the ability to grow. That's the time when your network gets tested the most. People you think you thought were good friends get tested whether they're actually good friends. So there all these questions would get answered in the first year itself. And second year, you start seeing the outcome of some of the things that you started testing on. So the multiple phase approach. So lots of learnings in this whole approach.
Yes, sir, it was very helpful. Uh, Ritik Shukla from NIT KKR is asking that startup during college or after college? Like if during college, how to start working on a startup idea during his college life?
Doesn't matter during college or after college. My daughter actually still studying in US. When she finished her second year, she started a startup, um along with two of her friends who were in different colleges. So three of them, they had known each other for a while, and they started a platform to help students get funded or get you know support, educational kind of a grant support. So there were very limited such platforms that are actually providing support to students. So they actually created that startup just when they were in the second year. And now they've raised funds from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign endowment fund. Lots of people have come forward to support them. In fact, even the job market there, you get much better perception or reception of the job market when you have such thing. In fact, there are companies like Microsoft, where in fact she's joining now, has told her that we'll continue to support your startup. So people sometimes will even help you continue to build your startup further. So it doesn't really matter when you start. I think what matters is that if you believe in the idea and if you believe that you are ready to get started with it, you do need a team around it, and you need right mentorship and support. These are the things that you need. You can start at any age, at any place.
Yes, sir, that was really helpful. I hope Ritik, your doubt is cleared. Now, sir, like we can take the last question of the session. It's my personal question. Like, what were your learnings from your IIT days or your college days that was helpful for you in your future entrepreneurial journey?
Few things which I learned. I think one, uh, maybe I learned it later, not during IIT, which was about, while grades are important, it's even more important to know people around you and to make sure that the people around you know you. So be very active and proactive, and that helps you do networking. And fortunately for me, I used to sing and on stage. I created a lot of friends because of that, and I kind of got known because of that in my campus. Get involved a lot in activities which bring you more friends or more network of people. Because even 10 years later, when you go and meet with someone, chances are that if they were not in your class, if they were not in your hostel, or if they were not in specific projects with you, or not in a specific team, sports team, etc., chances are very high that they will not even remember who you are. But if you've done a good job in the campus, making sure that the people know you well, uh, chances are very high that even after 20 years, people will remember that there was that guy who did something different. Um, Obviously, you will also need to continuously start networking with people. So I always say that focus on grades. Don't be a nerd, but make as many friends as you can. while either it is your seniors or even your juniors, same batch, of course. So that's one very important thing that learning for me. And I think your professors are very important. I've realized that many times people just consider professors as the teachers who just are there. The interaction is as long as they've given them the right grades. Once the grades are given, you tend to forget them. um, Imagine those professors have actually taught people before who've gone on become unicorns now, right? So the kind of network they will have, if you have good relationship with the professors, the chances are very high that it will help you at some point. So it's about networking eventually.
Yes, sir. That was very helpful, and we'll surely keep this in mind. And thank you for coming to today's session and giving us your some time from your busy schedule and inspiring us. With this, we end this amazingly insightful session with our guest speaker, Mr. Vikram Gupta, sir. It was pleasure to have you with us today, sir. Uh, with
Thank you
this,
so much for having me.
yes, sir. With this, we end this wonderful evening. I hope all of you in the audience had a wonderful time and would like to take the lessons learned from today ahead in your life. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Do you have an idea for a startup or an established project? Are you confused about how to gain guidance, international and national media coverage and opportunities with your startup? Empresario is the one-place solution to all your problems. Fill your Empresario questionnaire today and most importantly mention your unique idea. Then meet your mentors who help you in brushing and improvising your idea. Now your idea is ready to bring a change, not in just you but for everyone. Submit your business model for final submission. The best innovative idea packs wins the grand trophy, along with prizes worth rupees 5 million. Direct entry to semi-finals of BMCG 2022. Mentorship opportunities from industry's experts and professionals. Chance to pitch in front of leading investors. Idea validation platform to validate your idea. Immense media presence, networking and incubation opportunities, workshops, startup services, and content-rich feedback from world-class entrepreneurs. Hurry up! Registration deadline is 20th November. Register at www.sli@kgp.org Empresario. This is your dream comes true.
Thank you guys for joining and stay connected for more such events by Entrepreneurship Cell IIT Kharagpur through our social media handles. Thank you for being with us.